Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I want to talk a little bit about magic and how it functions in a fantasy universe. A long time ago, one of my earlier videos, I actually originally had made it for my older channel and then ported it over to this one when I first started this channel and just wanted to get some content on it quickly. And it was one of the gaming videos I'd made for the old channel, but it was when the controversy about, all the stink about orcs and racism had first popped up again. It's not the first time. That a lot of these things that keep becoming controversies, these are not, in a way, they're not new controversies. They just kind of rear their head periodically as new generations of people seem to rediscover them and like have a little minor internal freak out over something they weren't expecting, I guess. But it was, the basic kind of crux of the matter is that, because humans and elves and orcs can all crossbreed so easily and so frequently in these games because of the presence of them as player characters, then like that technically makes them all the same species. And then the way there's kind of like this hierarchy of like, order of who's the more noble and pure being compared to the others, that is a little like caste system-y type racist, on a very technical by the book level. There was some pushback along the lines of genetics isn't a thing, it's a fantasy world, they're all formed out of clay originally by the gods, kind of reasoning, which is all well and good, but I don't know. Perhaps my thinking on magic has been shaped too much by having been exposed to Mage the Ascension when I was a teenager. Even though the first games I got into were Palladium games, and so there's still a lot of stuff about how magic and rifts works that I very much approve of because it kind of explains a lot of the mystique and legendary about magic in our own culture. Mage did a wonderful job of explaining and presenting the cosmology and the metaphysics that drive it all. And, even to this day, despite the fact it's been decades since I've even had a copy of Mage of the Ascension or have run it, I still carry a lot of that thinking forward. The problem with Mage is the vague nature in which the spell system worked. I remember from having run it, a lot of Mage games would typically devolve into these long, really weird arguments about exactly what Forces 3 really allows you to do, or Entropy 2 really implies. Basically, kind of the role-playing game equivalent of lawyers arguing over what the exact meaning of the word is kind of a thing. But in terms of the idea that, it is the mages using their will to forcibly bend and warp reality to match what they want it to be. If you carry that kind of just general outlook over into other fantasy settings that involve magic, the logic carries forward. I mean, it's not like the people who wrote Mage just kind of came up with all that out of the ether themselves. They were themselves basing these ideas on stuff from history and fiction. So all of these things come from a common cultural pool of knowledge, so to say, and are themselves different attempts to try to express that. But part of the underlying kind of thing about magic as imposing your will upon reality is implying that reality is a thing. So yeah, stuff like tieflings and Aasimar and the races, Genasi, people who are the offspring of spiritual beings from other planes. They are half creature of magic, but despite the general legendary presentation that elves long ago came from the Feywild and all that other kind of stuff, they're beings of flesh, and they like to get it on, just like orcs and humans, and they like to get it on with orcs and humans, who all like to get it on with each other and have little half orcs and little half elves running around with the pitter patter of little half orc feet and all that. I don't see any, if your setting still allows for the domestication of plants and domestication of animals and people being able to crossbreed, certain substrains of dogs to create a new breed of dog, if you're, able to, alter your crop yields, be able to grow plumper, juicier corn, all that kind of stuff kind of implies that there is a biological reality that's going on. And so the idea that like the humanoids, the fleshly humanoids, like should still be bound to those rules somewhat. Periodically, you do get these weird, exceptional, immaculate conception kind of scenarios. Your mom saw a really pretty swan one day by the lake, and it turned into a bolt of lightning and had its way with her, and now you're Hercules, kind of a thing. But elves, to a degree that, yeah, they're not human, but there is also a degree that they are just people out there in the forest, so to say. So, I don't see why, like, the basic rules of genealogy wouldn't still apply, in the same way that, yes, D&D is a setting where, you have magic carpets and flying castles and people able to work magic to teleport and float and levitate and all that other kind of stuff. And yet, though, to your average person, if they pick up an object and let go of it, it falls to the floor with a tremendous clatter. So the whole point of the fact that people are using magic to defy gravity is stating that gravity exists in the setting. And so likewise, just because you have a few magical beings occasionally creating crossbreeds with mortal races doesn't mean that elves, dwarves, humans, halflings, that they're all not themselves like fleshly biological creatures that operate as biological creatures, unless you're going for like a third tier of fantasy. A lot of people tend to divide fantasy up into low fantasy and high fantasy. Low fantasy tends to be much more closer to an analog for actual real world historical periods, where magic is present, but it's not like every day and in your face. If you're playing a magic user, you're part of an elite small group in that world of people who know magic. Whereas high fantasy is generally like magic's everywhere. It's an easy occupation to learn. They got schools for it. If you got enough money, you can learn to be a magician, pretty much, unless you just don't have the intelligence for it, kind of a thing. And like the magic items are easy to acquire, and it kind of in many ways it just turns it into a kind of a low-key sci-fi setting, except they're not trying to explain all the nifty gizmos with electricity and quantum mechanics. Instead, it's all based on spells and ongoing charms and wards and all that other kind of stuff. You don't have to devise a nuclear power source to power your robots. Instead, they all have the souls of demons trapped inside a furnace that powers their robotic husk and all that kind of stuff. And that's generally like the two categories that most people divide it into. I think there should be kind of a third category, though, that's the more kind of fairy tale / religious origin story kind of fantasy, where it is very much like the everything is iconic and omenistic, and the creatures are literally like handcrafted by the gods. They are not beings that are of flesh in a way, or that the world is still young and born, and the compounding factors of time haven't whittled down mortal life yet into what current state we find ourselves in, kind of a thing. But that's and there's probably a reason why that genre isn't like really used much for role-playing games. Perhaps the closest to it is you get the more kind of like I said, your fairy tale kind of stuff, an all Feywild kind of game where the elves like know themselves to have been handcrafted by Corellon because they can go talk to him in person, kind of a setting. But like for your average fantasy world, even like Tolkien's fantasy world being like it's always going to be like the default template that so much of D&D and the rest of the fantasy genre kind of derives itself from, for good or ill. Even that like did have the like a base fundamental reality of that people beget people, and that they carry traits forward from each other. And the thing that makes two creatures different from each other is the fact that they can't mix. There's no half horses running around, I guess, unless you have centaurs, and maybe that's your secret origin to centaurs. They're actually just human half horses, because anything can breed with anything, because you're in a world that's based on magical reality and isn't bound to any world temporal kind of limitations that we experience. I don't know. Like I said, to me, like the thing that makes magic magic is that it's enforcing your will on reality. And so while that may mean that your setting has an ease to which people can force their will over reality, doesn't mean that there isn't reality. In fact, you kind of have to have the presence of reality and realism in order for the magic to be magical. Otherwise, it's just an alternate, weird, wonky new form of physics. Which, if you want to do that, fine. That's kind of basically what Spelljammer is in many ways. Well, anyway, leave comments below about your thoughts on all this. Hit like and subscribe. Say something negative about me. I'm sure you have it in you. And stay waspinated.